There's a town in America that's been on fire for 60 years. The ground is literally burning, and 5 people refuse to leave. Another town where the government evacuated everyone and still won't say why. And one where the cemetery has so many bodies they just stopped counting. These aren't horror movie sets with Groupon tickets. These are real places with zip codes. And some of them, people still live there. The ground is toxic, the buildings are collapsing, or the air itself could kill you. Everyone else packed up and left. But a handful of people looked around and said, "Nah, I'm good." What kind of person stays when literally everyone else fled? That's not stubbornness. That's a different level of commitment. We're counting down 15 of the creepiest towns in America. The kind where street lights flicker even when there's no power. Where locals won't talk about what happened. Where your GPS loses signal and suddenly you're very aware of your own breathing. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because the next time you take a wrong turn on a back road, you'll want to know which towns not to stop in. Let's break it down. Centralia, Pennsylvania. There's a town in Pennsylvania that's been on fire for over 60 years. Not metaphorically, the ground is literally burning. Centralia. Population, technically still a town. Emotionally, final boss level side quest. Back in 1962, someone thought it'd be a genius move to burn trash in an old mining pit under town. Spoiler, that pit was connected to a massive underground coal seam. The fire slipped into the mines, caught, and just never stopped. Let's talk numbers for a second. Original population, about 1,500 people. Today, basically a handful of holdouts. Fire footprint, hundreds of acres underground. Estimated time until it burns out, up to 250 more years. So yeah, the ground is hotter than your ex's temper. In some spots, it hits around 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Sinkholes have opened up in graveyards, and toxic gas vents out of cracks in the street. When even the cemetery isn't safe, that's your sign to move. The state eventually said, nope, and condemned the entire town. Homes were bought out and bulldozed, roads were closed, the famous graffiti highway warped so badly they just buried it. One lonely church and a few stubborn houses are all that's left, like a horror movie set someone forgot to strike. And here's the wildest part. Centralia helped inspire Silent Hill. When your town becomes the reference image for a video game about hell dimensions, maybe it's time to stop checking your property value and just leave. Picture, Oklahoma. If Centralia is hell from below, picture is hell from every direction. Once upon a time, this was a mining boom town that helped fuel World War ammunition with lead and zinc. Impressive on paper, until you realize they Swiss cheesed the ground with around 14,000 mine shafts and stacked enormous piles of toxic mine waste all over town. Those waste piles, locals call them chat. Cute name, horrifying contents. Lead-laced rock, sky high as 200-foot hills, just sitting there blowing dust into neighborhoods. By the 1980s, the EPA stepped in and labeled the area part of the Tar Creek Superfund site, thanks to catastrophic groundwater contamination. The stats are brutal. Over a third of tested kids had elevated lead levels in their blood. Lead poisoning like that can cause lifelong neurological damage. Later studies said more than 80% of buildings, including the school, were at risk of collapsing into sinkholes. So you've got poisoned water, poisoned soil, poisoned air, and the ground might eat your house. Perfect. Then an EF4 tornado hit in 2008 and wiped out around 150 homes, which is the universe's way of saying, you really shouldn't live here, twice. Most people took the hint. By the 2010s, fewer than a few dozen residents remained to watch one of the most toxic landscapes in the country slowly crumble around them. Imagine walking through town. Rusted towers, ghostly chat piles, empty streets, and warning signs everywhere. It looks like a movie set for an apocalypse flick, except this one is backed by federal documents and blood tests. Remember Centralia's never-ending fire? Pitcher basically replied, "Cool story. Try breathing here." Whittier, Alaska. What if your entire town lived in one building, and the only way out was a tunnel that locks at night? Welcome to Whittier, Alaska. This place looks like someone merged a Cold War bunker with a cruise ship port, and then dared people to move in. Almost everyone lives in one concrete high-rise called Begich Towers. Inside, apartments, a school, a church, a store, the post office, basically an entire town stacked on 14 floors of brutalist architecture. Step outside and you're pinned between mountains, ocean, and weather that feels personally offended by your presence. The only land access is through a 2.5-mile tunnel that closes at night. Miss the cutoff, and congratulations, you're trapped until morning. On paper, the numbers look normal. A couple hundred residents, a modest rent range, Official crime rates that are low because, frankly, where would you even run? But that's not the creepy part, it's the psychology. Imagine sharing a building with your ex, your boss, your dentist, and the one neighbor who definitely has a conspiracy wall, and there's nowhere else to go in winter. During storms, the hallways go quiet, the wind screams around the concrete, and the whole building creaks like it's trying to talk. Kids grow up spending entire winters barely stepping outside. Your commute is an elevator ride. Your social life is elevator small talk. Whittier isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by the idea of never really leaving. If Helltown, Ohio is creepy because nobody's allowed to live there, Whittier is creepy because everyone is, and they're all under the same roof. Cairo, Illinois. Cairo is the town that should have won and absolutely didn't. It sits right where the Mississippi and Ohio rivers meet. Basically the jackpot square on a shipping and trade board. By all logic, it should have become a powerhouse river city. Instead, you turn around from that gorgeous river view and see empty buildings, broken sidewalks, and a downtown that looks like someone hit pause and never came back. Here's the harsh reality. Population fell from around 15,000 in the early 1900s to roughly a tenth of that today. Housing is so cheap it's past bargain and into is this cursed territory. Poverty and unemployment sit well above state and national averages. But Cairo didn't just randomly fade. Decades of structural racism, violent backlash, and systemic disinvestment hollowed it out from the inside. In the 1960s and 70s, you had organized crime, racial violence, and even white vigilante groups terrorizing black residents. Investment dried up, businesses fled, infrastructure crumbled, and basic services, including a full-service grocery store, disappeared for years. So you end up with this unsettling contrast. Historic architecture, ornate old buildings, and almost nobody using them. It's not a ghost town because people do still live there, but it feels like a ghost town because opportunity left a long time ago. It looks peaceful until you need a job, a doctor, or a supermarket. Then, that quiet stops feeling relaxing and starts feeling like a warning. Cairo isn't creepy because of paranormal stories. It's creepy because of how clearly you can see what happens when policy and prejudice slowly strangle a place over generations. Dudleytown, Connecticut. Now let's go from economic horror to full, this place might be cursed, energy. Dudleytown is a settlement that hit population zero, and somehow still has a reputation louder than most actual cities. No power, no residents, no welcome sign, just dense forest, old stone walls, and a name locals drop with the same tone you'd use for an ex you don't talk about anymore. Back in the 1700s, it was a normal colonial outpost. Farmhouses, families, people trying to make a life in a quiet valley. Then came crop failures, disease, strange accidents, and a string of tragedies that emptied the place out by around 1900. Historians will tell you it was bad soil and isolation. Locals will tell you it was a curse that followed the Dudley family from England. Today, the land is privately owned and tightly controlled. No public access, no casual exploring. Trespassers report overwhelming dread, strange noises, and the feeling of being watched. And local police have no shortage of people ignoring the keep out signs because humans are allergic to minding their business around anything labeled haunted. Here's the thing. Nothing there is commercialized. No ticket booth, no gift shop, just woods that feel a little too quiet. Hikers talk about the silence, no birds, no wind, just your own breathing getting louder and louder until you suddenly realize how badly you want to leave. It's not dangerous because something jumps out at you. It's dangerous because nothing does. Your brain fills in the gaps, and that might be the scariest thing on this whole list. Antelope, Oregon. There's a town in Oregon where a cult literally took over the government and then committed bioterrorism. We're not talking metaphors here. Actual hostile takeover. Actual biological weapons. Antelope. Population. Around 75 people who probably have some stories. So here's what went down. 1981. Followers of this guru named Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh roll up and buy a massive 60,000-acre ranch near town. Thousands of cult members start moving in. And the locals are like, this feels weird. Turns out, valid concern. The Rajneeshis didn't just move in. They weaponized Oregon election law, took over the town council, and literally renamed the town Rajneesh. Like they were playing SimCity with other people's lives. But wait, it gets worse. In 1984, they pulled off the first and largest bioterror attack in U.S. history. Cult members deliberately contaminated salad bars at 10 restaurants with salmonella. Not as a prank, as a political strategy. 751 people got sick. Their goal? Incapacitate voters before an election so their candidates would win. Because nothing says democracy like giving an entire county food poisoning. And they weren't done planning. The conspiracy went deeper. Poison the entire Wasco County water supply. Assassinate federal prosecutors. Take out county officials who opposed them. This wasn't some fringe group in a basement. These people had money, organization, and zero chill. Eventually, internal drama tore the cult apart. The Bhagwan threw his own people under the bus and fled to India. The commune collapsed in 1985. And today, the ranch is a Christian youth camp. Kinda ironic? Here's why Antelope is terrifying. No ghosts, no curses. Just documented proof that a small American town got hijacked by people willing to poison hundreds of innocent humans to stay in power. If biological warfare at the Sizzler doesn't keep you up at night, I don't know what will. Moonville, Ohio. Moonville is what happens when a town dies so hard even the afterlife shows up to work. This coal mining settlement popped up in the 1850s and was completely abandoned by 1947. Now, just a cemetery, a tunnel, and foundation stones slowly being eaten by Appalachian forest. But here's the thing. The town may be dead, but something is definitely still clocking in. Moonville's dark reputation comes from over 21 documented deaths on the railroad tracks that cut through town. And today, hikers on the Moonville Rail Trail report seeing phantom trainmen carrying lanterns. Not one ghost, multiple ghosts, with names. Locals call them the Engineer, the Brakeman, and the Lavender Lady. That's right, the ghosts have a whole crew roster like they're still running shifts. The tunnel itself is still accessible. You can walk through it, and when you do, the temperature drops, weird sounds echo, and you immediately regret every life choice that led you there. What makes Moonville genuinely unsettling isn't just the ghost stories, it's the isolation. You're deep in thick forest, miles from civilization, when you stumble on remnants of a community that just vanished. And here's the creepy part. The paranormal reports are consistent across decades. Different people, different years, same apparitions, same locations. So either there's genuine supernatural activity happening, or this is the most dedicated collective delusion in Ohio history. Honestly, both options are unsettling. Grafton, Utah. Grafton looks like a postcard. Rustic buildings, red rock formations, that whole Instagram-worthy ghost town aesthetic near Zion National Park. Then you visit the cemetery, and the vibes change real fast. Out of roughly 77 graves, around 50 belong to children. Kids who died from diphtheria, tuberculosis, scarlet fever, diseases that just ripped through this tiny settlement in the 1860s to 1880s. 1866 was especially brutal. About 13 documented deaths that year. Here's just some of what happened. A 9-year-old boy dragged to death by a horse. 2 young girls, 14-year-old Loretta Russell and 13-year-old Elizabeth Woodbury, killed when their swing broke. They were just on a swing. The beam snapped. Both died. Grafton was founded in 1859 by Mormon families sent to grow cotton. The original settlement was called Wheeler, but in 1862, a massive flood completely destroyed it, forcing everyone to relocate a mile upstream. Then came the Black Hawk War. Most families fled to nearby Rockville for protection. By 1920, only 3 families remained. By 1944, the last residents left. No electricity or plumbing was ever installed. The town is literally frozen in pioneer-era conditions. Today, visitors report disembodied footsteps on creaky wooden floors, cold spots in abandoned buildings, shadowy figures in windows, and floating orbs photographed in the graveyard at dusk. There's even a historical account from 1927 where a 12-year-old girl said she saw the apparitions of the 2 girls who died on the swing. Believe in ghosts or don't, but standing in a cemetery where over half the graves belong to children hits different. That's not spooky, that's just tragic on a level that soaks into the ground. Would you camp there overnight? Because people do, and honestly, the confidence is concerning. Salem, Massachusetts. Salem, you know the name. You've seen the tourist merch, but the actual history, somehow worse than the folklore. Between February 1692 and May 1693, mass hysteria turned this Puritan town into a nightmare. Over 200 people accused of witchcraft. 30 found guilty. 19 executed by hanging. The trial started when 2 young girls, 9-year-old Betty Paris and 11-year-old Abigail Williams, had fits that witnesses described as beyond the power of epileptic fits or natural disease. Screaming, throwing objects, contorting into impossible positions, crawling under furniture. And instead of, I don't know, calling a doctor, the town decided witches. The hysteria spread like wildfire. Religious extremism, social paranoia, and good old-fashioned misogyny meant women were disproportionately targeted. But here's the part that haunts me. Giles Corey. Giles was an 80-year-old farmer who refused to enter a plea. So they subjected him to pressing. They literally placed stones on his chest until he was crushed to death. The only such execution in Massachusetts history. 80 years old, crushed under rocks, because he wouldn't say guilty or not guilty. The executed were buried in shallow graves, and oral history says families snuck out after dark to reclaim the bodies for proper burial on private land. Judge Jonathan Corwin oversaw 19 executions and never apologized. Not once. Even when other officials expressed regret, he stayed silent. His home, the Witch House, still stands as the only structure with direct ties to the trials. Today, Salem's entire economy runs on its dark past. Ghost tours, museums, paranormal investigations year-round. The town literally monetized its own historical trauma. Believe in the supernatural or not, the documented trauma ensures Salem will never escape what happened. And honestly, maybe it shouldn't. New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans didn't just accumulate dark history, it marinated in it for 3 centuries. Let's start with the cemeteries. The cities of the dead. Above-ground tombs stacked like tiny marble houses because the water table is so high, you literally can't bury people normally. Walk through them, and it feels like a maze designed by someone who really wanted you to get lost among corpses. The yellow fever epidemic of 1853 killed over 8,000 people in a single season. Families couldn't grieve fast enough. Bodies piled up. The cemeteries filled faster than they could expand. But the true horror. 1834. The LaLaurie Mansion. A kitchen fire broke out. Rescuers rushed in. And what they found in a hidden torture chamber shocked even people who'd seen some things. Enslaved people, horrifically mutilated, still alive. Madame Delphine LaLaurie and her husband fled to Paris before anyone could arrest them. The mansion? Still one of America's most haunted locations. And honestly, if anywhere deserves to be haunted, it's that place. But wait, there's more darkness. The French Quarter had public executions at Jackson Square until 1860. Historical records document torture methods, like breaking people on the wheel and burning them alive. Native Americans, especially Natchez tribe members, were burned alive in the 1730s. Add in New Orleans' unique voodoo culture, West African spiritual traditions merged with Catholicism in the late 18th century, and you've got layers on layers of spiritual intensity. This city is a paranormal lasagna. Every layer is unsettling. Ghost tours run every night because there's genuinely too much darkness for one tour to cover. You could do a different horror tour every night for a month and still not hit everything. When your city's tourism slogan could be built on bones, vibes immaculate, you know the past isn't past. It's just waiting in the French Quarter with a drink. Bodie, California. Bodie is the American gold rush with all the romance stripped out. By the early 1880s, this California boomtown was packed with prospectors, gamblers, sex workers, and criminals, living in a lawless outpost where violence was Tuesday and justice was a suggestion. Then the gold ran out, and people left so fast they abandoned everything. Kitchen tables still set for meals that never got eaten. Beds unmade. Tools on workbenches, like everyone just evaporated mid-task. Today, over 200 frontier-era buildings sit in arrested decay, meaning they're stabilized but not restored. It's a time capsule of 19th century chaos frozen exactly as people left it. Bodie's violent reputation wasn't exaggerated. Bodies regularly showed up in Boot Hill Cemetery after shootouts, mining accidents, or brutal winters. This wasn't the fun kind of Wild West. This was the you might die on your way to buy flour kind of Wild West. What makes Bodie effective for paranormal tourism? It's accessible. It's a state park about 48 miles northeast of Yosemite. Ranger-led tours during the day, ghost tours in summer at night. Unlike places where urban legends dominate, Bodie's darkness comes from documented records. Murders, claim-jumping violence, the brutal reality of frontier capitalism. The preserved buildings give you this eerie feeling that residents could return any second, except they won't, because everyone who lived here either struck it rich and left, or died broke and desperate. Picture walking through empty saloons, past dusty bars with bottles still on shelves, beds still made, and knowing someone died violently in half these buildings. That's not haunted. That's just heavy. Bannock, Montana. Bannock earned the title toughest town in the West through sheer volume of violence. This wasn't a cute nickname. The stagecoach route between Bannock and nearby Virginia City became a literal killing field during the 1860s gold rush. Bandits murdered travelers so frequently people started moving in armed convoys like they were crossing a war zone. The town attracted claim jumpers, road agents, and outlaws who saw Montana Territory as a lawless playground. But here's the twist that makes this even darker. The sheriff was one of the worst criminals. Sheriff Henry Plummer secretly led a gang of road agents called the Innocents. He robbed and murdered travelers while literally being the guy supposed to stop robberies and murders. He had inside information. He had a badge. He had zero moral compass. When vigilantes finally figured out his double life, they hanged him and over 20 gang members in January 1864. Their version of frontier justice was just as brutal as the crimes they were punishing. Today, Bannock is a well-preserved ghost town with about 60 structures maintained as a state park. The Hotel Mead is reportedly the most haunted spot. Paranormal investigators document apparitions, unexplained sounds, cold spots, and rooms where violent deaths happened. Unlike commercialized haunted attractions, Bannock's reputation comes from documented historical violence, not made-up legends. The isolation adds to the atmosphere. You're standing in buildings where people were murdered, in a town so remote that screaming for help would have been pointless. The preserved gallows are still there, a grim reminder that justice in Bannock was often as brutal as the crimes. When your sheriff is running the murder gang, you know the town is broken beyond repair. Remember when Antelope had a cult problem? Bannock said, "Cute, we had a corrupt sheriff running a serial killer gang." Fort Jefferson, Dry Tortugas, Florida. Fort Jefferson is what happens when you build a maximum security prison on a remote island 70 miles from Key West and then trap everyone inside during a plague. This massive hexagonal fortress was made from 16 million handmade red bricks. It served as a Civil War military prison where escape was basically impossible. You'd have to swim through shark-infested waters, assuming you even made it past the walls. The most famous prisoner? Dr. Samuel Mudd. He was convicted of conspiracy in Abraham Lincoln's assassination for setting John Wilkes Booth's broken leg. Mudd claimed he didn't know who Booth was. Didn't matter. He got sent to an island prison anyway. Then yellow fever arrived in 1867. The outbreak killed over 30 soldiers and prisoners. The fortress turned into a death trap. You're quarantined, infected, and you can see the ocean in every direction, but you can't reach safety. That's psychological torture on a level most horror movies can't touch. Today, Fort Jefferson is part of Dry Tortugas National Park. You can only get there by seaplane or boat, so it still feels isolated. Visitors and park rangers report shadowy figures in bastions, cold spots in cells where prisoners died, disembodied moans echoing through corridors, and a recurring woman in white on the ramparts at sunset. Whether that's genuine supernatural activity or just the psychological weight of documented suffering is up for debate. But standing in cells where men died slowly from disease creates an undeniable atmosphere of despair. Imagine being trapped on an island, sick, watching people die around you, and knowing there's no way out. That's not a ghost story. That's documented history. If Whittier traps you in a building, Fort Jefferson traps you on an island with sharks and ghosts and regret. Savannah, Georgia. Savannah's Southern Gothic charm is doing a lot of heavy lifting to cover up a deeply disturbing fact. This city was literally built on top of thousands of unmarked graves. Bonaventure Cemetery officially holds about 12,000 people, but only 700 gravestones are visible. That means over 11,000 bodies are buried under manicured lawns with no marker, no name, nothing. When Savannah expanded in the 19th century, authorities didn't relocate remains. They just paved over them. Abercorn Street? Built directly on top of thousands of graves. Two of Savannah's famous squares? Built on unmarked burial grounds of enslaved people. The city hit cemetery capacity after yellow fever outbreaks decimated the population. Mass burials happened so fast there wasn't time for proper documentation. So now you've got entire city blocks where the ground is just full of forgotten dead. The Mercer Williams House, centerpiece of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, gained notoriety after Danny Hansford and Jim Williams both died there. Visitors report seeing a young boy in the windows, possibly the spirit of a child who died there in 1969. What makes Savannah eerie is the contrast. Spanish moss dripping from oak trees, beautiful antebellum architecture, charming cobblestone streets, all concealing layers of forgotten dead beneath your feet. The ghost tour industry thrives here because the darkness is real and documented, not manufactured. When you walk through Savannah's historic district, you're literally walking over unmarked graves of thousands who were buried and forgotten. Their final resting places are now tourist attractions. Think about that. You're taking a selfie. Underneath you, bones. Lots of bones. No names, no memorials, just death and Spanish moss. Marion, Indiana. Marion's dark history is a gut punch of documented American horror. August 7th, 1930. Over 10,000 people gathered in Marion to witness the lynching of Thomas Shipp and Abe Smith, two black teenagers accused of murder and rape. This wasn't done in secret. It was a public spectacle. The crowd posed for photographs with the bodies. Those images became the most widely circulated lynching photographs in American history. A third intended victim, 16-year-old James Cameron, was pulled from the mob at the last moment and survived. He later founded America's Black Holocaust Museum. The lynching happened in the town square. Local authorities knew. Thousands of witnesses. Photographic evidence showing participants' faces clearly. And nobody was arrested. Here's what makes Marion's history so chilling. The casual nature of the violence. Families brought children to watch. Photographers sold souvenir postcards of the lynching. Participants showed no fear of consequences because they knew none would come. For decades, Marion tried to erase this from public memory. It wasn't until activists pushed for a historical marker in 1993 that the town started acknowledging what happened. Today, Marion is a functioning city of about 29,000 residents. But the psychological weight of that 1930 spectacle lynching remains embedded in the community's identity. This is a different category of American darkness. Not environmental disaster, not paranormal activity, but documented proof of how normalized racial violence was in early 20th century America, and how communities can keep functioning while carrying the burden of atrocities committed in broad daylight. There's no ghost story here, just the documented truth that 10,000 people showed up to watch two teenagers die, took pictures, and went home like it was a normal Thursday. That's the kind of horror that doesn't need embellishment. These 15 locations prove that America's creepiest places aren't campfire stories. Some are completely abandoned. Some still have residents clinging to what's left. And some have just learned to live with their darkness. Fire under the ground, toxic waste in the air, cult takeovers, corrupt sheriffs running murder gangs, public lynchings as family entertainment. This is America when you zoom in past the Instagram filters. Hit subscribe, because there's a lot more American lore we haven't covered yet. And trust me, it only gets weirder from here.
When you think creepy American town, you're thinking abandoned coal mines in Pennsylvania, right? Maybe some cursed New England village with a witch trial past? Texas has 900 ghost towns. Towns built on mass graves and serial killers who were never caught. These are the creepiest towns in Texas. Most still exist, and some have people still living in them. Galveston. There's a coastal city in Texas built on top of 12,000 corpses. The bodies are still there, under your feet. September 8th, 1900. Galveston gets hit by a Category 4 hurricane with zero warning. 6,000 to 12,000 people die overnight. That's the deadliest natural disaster in American history happening in your backyard. But they couldn't bury everyone, so they loaded bodies onto barges and dumped them in the Gulf. The ocean said, nah, and sent them back. Bloated, worse condition, washing up on shore for weeks. So what did they do? Recruited every male over 13 to pile corpses and burn them. Can you imagine? You're a teenager stacking body parts into pyres. That's your Tuesday. The bones are still buried around the island. You're walking on mass graves, and nobody told you. Now the whole city is haunted. Ashton Villa has Betty Brown moving furniture. Hotel Galvez has a bride waiting for a drowned fiancé. The Mansard house had two different boys jump through the same third-story window decades apart, claiming something told them to. Population today? 53,000 people living in America's largest cemetery, Texarkana. In 1946, a masked serial killer terrorized Texarkana for 10 weeks and was never caught. He's still out there, probably dead now, but still, they called him the Phantom Killer. 8 attacks, 5 murders, all targeting young couples in parked cars, just vibing in lovers' lanes, and this psycho shows up wearing a bag over his head with eye holes cut out. The entire town lost its mind. Gun stores sold out of ammunition. Every house bought guard dogs. Neighbors who used to walk in unannounced now got greeted with loaded shotguns. Businesses closed before sunset. Actual curfews imposed. And the cops? Helpless. Completely helpless. This guy would strike, vanish into thin air, and they'd find nothing. No leads. No witnesses who survived long enough to identify him. He just stopped. After 10 weeks, he disappeared and never killed again. Or he did and we don't know. That's somehow worse. The case is still unsolved. 80 years later, the fear never left. Modern Texarkana has a murder rate of 351 per 100,000 residents. That's more than 3 times higher than Birmingham, Alabama, one of the most dangerous cities in America. Something broke in that town and never healed. Tascosa. Picture this. You're the last 2 people in a ghost town. Your husband dies. You stay anyway. For 27 years. Alone. Walking to his grave. Every single day. That's Frenchie McCormick, former dance hall girl, former card dealer. She watched everyone leave Tascosa after the railroad bypassed it in the 1880s. Her husband, Mickey, a gambler, died in 1912. She didn't leave. No running water, no electricity, no other humans. Just Frenchie and Mickey's grave. Every day for 27 years, she walked that path. The town crumbling around her, houses collapsing, silence so thick you could choke on it. Why? Nobody knows. Devotion? Grief? Madness? All 3? In its prime, Tascosa was the cowboy capital of the plains. Billy the Kid rustled cattle here. Pat Garrett hung out at the saloons, and a lot of people died. 28 confirmed deaths by gunshot in just 2 years. They had a Boot Hill Cemetery working overtime. Frenchie finally left in 1939 when her health failed and she died in 1941. They buried her next to Mickey. Now it's a boys' ranch. Hundreds of kids running around where Frenchie walked alone for nearly 3 decades. Jefferson. Jefferson, Texas is the most haunted town in the state. And honestly, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. They're selling it. The Grove, a Victorian mansion from the 1860s, is so haunted the original owner T.C. Burks moved his family out after a few months. His explanation? We can't live there. What happens inside? Mirrors fall off walls. Loud wailing from upstairs when nobody's there. Furniture moves by itself. Unexplained moisture appears on floors. Doors lock and unlock on their own. The history is dark. Multiple murders happened in that area during Reconstruction. The Stockade case saw black residents and freedmen brutally killed. Some say a black man was hanged on the back porch of the Grove. Guests report being constantly watched. That skin-crawling feeling when you know something's behind you, but you don't want to turn around. The whole town leans into it now. Ghost tours, haunted hotels, paranormal investigation packages. But here's the thing. When locals warn you not to go somewhere after dark, they're not joking. They're not doing a bit for tourists. They mean it. There are buildings in Jefferson where even the ghost tour guides won't enter alone. That should tell you everything. Marfa. There's a tiny desert town in West Texas where glowing orbs have appeared in the sky for 135 years. Scientists can't explain them. NASA tried and failed. The Marfa lights are a documented unexplained phenomena that happen regularly enough that there's an official viewing station. A retired NASA aerospace engineer studied them for 12 years and found zero pattern, zero explanation. He gave up. Theories range from UFOs to spirits of conquistadors to car headlights reflecting weird. None of these work. The lights appeared before cars existed. They don't follow roads. They split and merge and dance in ways physics doesn't like. But there's more. The Hotel Paisano is haunted by actors from the 1956 film Giant that was shot there. Staff report flickering lights, disembodied voices, and that fun being watched sensation we all love. Oh, and they have a haunted traffic light. Yes, a traffic light. It malfunctions constantly for no mechanical reason. Electricians have checked it. It's fine. It just doesn't want to cooperate. Marfa's population, around 1,700. It's not creepy because it's abandoned. It's creepy because something's happening and nobody knows what. Helena was called the toughest town on earth. Not in a fun cowboy way, in a we invented a death sport way. The Helena Duel. 2 men, bound together, knives, fight until one dies. For entertainment. That's not mythology. 1850s to 1880s entertainment in Karnes County was just gladiatorial murder. They also had the Cart War in 1857. White freighters versus Hispanic workers. Multiple murders, hangings, blood everywhere. Then, in 1884, wealthy rancher William G. Butler's son Emmett got killed in a saloon brawl. Butler allegedly looked at the town and said, "All right, for that I'll kill the town that killed my son." He did. He arranged for the railroad to bypass Helena by 7 miles, starved it of commerce. By 1894, the county seat moved. Helena died. Current population, 30 to 35 people. And many ghosts. Paranormal investigators have logged over 250 EVP sessions. Scratches appearing on people's chests. Voices identifying themselves as Hal. The Karnes County Historical Society preserves the buildings now. Some residents hate the ghost narrative. They want Helena remembered for pioneer history, not hauntings. But the violence soaked into the ground, and you can't scrub that out. Saragossa, May 22nd, 1987. Preschool graduation ceremony. Families packed into Saragossa Hall. A tornado drops on them like divine punishment. F4 tornado. Destroyed 85% of the town. Killed 30 people. 22 of them died inside that hall during the celebration. A community gathering became a tomb. Saragossa never recovered. Not because they couldn't rebuild, they did, but because trust shattered. What breaks isn't houses, it's faith. Faith that institutions will protect you, that community spaces are safe, that gathering together won't kill you. A descendant described the town as heavy. Not cursed, heavy. Like grief has mass, and it's pressing down on everything. Population in 2000, 185. It's barely hanging on. They built a new community center with a large shelter. Annual masses commemorate the victims, but the psychological landscape never healed. You can rebuild walls. You can't rebuild the feeling of safety. Saragossa exists in a permanent state of traumatized stasis. People stayed because leaving felt like abandoning the dead. That's not loyalty. That's survivor's guilt turned into geography. Indianola. Indianola is what happens when nature says, I want you gone. It was a major German immigrant port city, with a population of 5,000 rivaling Galveston. Then an 1875 hurricane killed 150 to 300 people, destroying most of the town. They rebuilt, because humans are stubborn and stupid. On August 19th, 1886, a Category 4 hurricane said, "Did I stutter?" and obliterated the town again. This time, something broke. Insurance companies refused hurricane coverage. Wells poisoned by salt water. And psychologically, the survivors looked at the land and went, this place wants us dead. By 1887, it was completely abandoned. Not declining, not fading. Everyone left. Today there's a statue of French explorer La Salle, marking where ambition used to stand. One statue, surrounded by nothing. Indianola is terrifying because it represents nature's veto power. Humans built a thriving city, and the Gulf Coast said, no, not here, never here. You can fight economic collapse. You can fight corporate greed. You can't fight the ocean when it's decided you don't get to exist. The land itself is hostile. That's a different kind of creepy. That's existential. Thurber. Thurber is what happens when a corporation owns your entire existence and then decides you're obsolete. In the late 1880s, Texas and Pacific Coal Company built a mining town with 10,000 residents at its peak. Electric lights, running water, an opera house, a 200-room hotel, and schools. Sounds great, right? Here's the catch. The company owned everything. Every building, every nail, every doorknob. You didn't own your house. You rented it from your employer. Company town. The dystopian kind. In the 1920s, coal demand dropped, and oil became king. But instead of downsizing or transitioning, they systematically dismantled the town, evicted everyone, tore down buildings, and moved operations west toward oil fields. By 1939, the town was mostly destroyed. Corporate murder of an entire community. Today, Thurber is brick ruins and one iconic smokestack visible from Interstate 20, about 75 miles west of Fort Worth. The creepiest part? The psychological profile. Company towns teach you that your worth equals your productivity. When productivity ends, so do you. In 1930, two boys saw a ghostly woman near the railroad tracks. Possibly the spirit of a carnival singer murdered decades earlier in a crime with no official record. Even the ghosts got erased. Uncertain. A town literally named Uncertain sits on Caddo Lake with 150 people and an aesthetic straight out of a horror film. Moss-draped trees, dark water, shifting shadows, silence that feels aggressive. The name comes from genuine confusion about its origins. Nobody's totally sure how or why it started. That's the vibe. Permanent ambiguity. Caddo Lake has been the filming location for multiple horror movies. Gatorbait, The Ghost of Cypress Swamp, Do or Die. Directors take one look and go, yeah, that'll work. Nearby, there's Dick and Charlie's Tea Room, an abandoned speakeasy frozen in time that nobody goes to after dark. The town has 0 major amenities. One business advertises as grocery, cafe, and beauty shop. That's 3 jobs nobody wants combined into one nightmare. It's not creepy because of ghosts. It's creepy because of the total absence of modern infrastructure pretending everything's fine. Visitors describe feeling like you stepped out of normal Texas and into some parallel dimension where progress forgot to show up. Dime box. Dime box got its name from the practice of leaving a dime in a box for mail delivery because they were too isolated for a real post office. That should tell you everything. Peak population, 500 after the 1913 railroad connection. Current population, 200 to 300. It's not abandoned. It's worse. It's fading. Slowly. No dramatic disaster. No catastrophic event. Just economic irrelevance turned into permanent stagnation. The main street used to have boardwalk sidewalks and a small bank. Now, empty storefronts. Minimal commercial activity. The kind of silence that feels judgmental. Residents don't talk about Dimebox with nostalgia. They talk about it with resignation. Like they're waiting for permission to leave, but nobody's granting it. Dimebox isn't creepy because something happened. It's creepy because nothing's happening now, or ever again. It's a town frozen mid-decline, with full consciousness of its own irrelevance. That's a special kind of psychological horror. Toya. Toya is what slow death looks like. Once a bustling railroad hub in Reeves County, the population peaked at 1,052 in 1910. Then the railroad moved, and Toya just stalled. Permanently. Current population, around 90. The buildings are intact, but empty. It's like everyone left mid-sentence, and nobody came back to finish. The abandoned Toya High School still stands. Locals claim it's haunted by ghost children who wander the streets at night. Toya's history is weirdly violent for a small town. 1885. Drunk sheriff kills a Texas Ranger in a saloon shootout. 1896. Gunslinger Killin' Jim Miller murders former Ranger Bud Frazier. 1906. A black man named Slab Pitts gets hanged by a mob for marrying a white woman. That last one isn't creepy. It's horrific. It's racism as murder. Let's be clear, but the violence soaked into the town's foundation, and when the economy left, what remained was just echoes. Toya exists in suspended decay. Not quite dead, not quite alive. You know that feeling when your phone's at 1% and you're just waiting for it to die? That's Toya. Spicewood Springs. Spicewood Springs Road in Northwest Austin has a hitchhiker ghost story with receipts. A driver picks up a woman. She's cold. He lends her his jacket. Drops her off. Next day, he goes back to get the jacket. Her family tells him she died 12 years ago. He finds his jacket draped over her gravestone at Oak Grove Cemetery. Classic ghost story, right? Except multiple people report the same experience. Same road, same cemetery, same jacket on gravestone ending. Spicewood Springs also has satanic cult rumors from the 1980s. Abandoned houses where doors open and slam by themselves. Mutilated animals. Werewolf legends, the full buffet of suburban folklore. Upper Bull Creek Trail has abandoned structure ruins and a rusted-out Volkswagen Beetle that's been decomposing for decades, and nobody knows why it's there. It's the layering that's creepy. Too many weird things in one geographic area. One ghost story? Fine. 5 different paranormal narratives plus unexplained physical objects? That's a pattern. Something's happening in Spicewood Springs. Or a lot of people are really committed to the bit. Kent. Kent sits in far west Texas, with 0 permanent residents and no explanation. Not the economy collapsed, not a disaster struck, just administrative abandonment. Founded before 1892 as Antelope, it was renamed Kent and had a post office, school, and small businesses. Then, nothing. No investment, no infrastructure, no reason to stay. So everyone left. What makes Kent genuinely unsettling is the absence of narrative. There's no story. Someone quoted online described it perfectly. Kent doesn't feel abandoned. It feels like it was crossed off a list. Government and economic systems looked at Kent and went, not worth it, and moved on. Living there would mean accepting that nothing, not business development, not infrastructure investment, not even basic attention, is coming to save you. Nearest grocery store, serious drive. Nearest hospital, even longer. You're on your own, completely. Kent is creepy because it represents systemic indifference at the municipal level. You're not important enough to destroy. You're not important enough to save. You're just irrelevant. Adrian. Adrian sits on Route 66, America's most romantic highway. Thousands of tourists drive past every year looking for nostalgia, and Adrian can't capitalize on any of it. Population, 150. Barely functional. Minimal tax base. Heavy reliance on county and state support. It's visible to everyone and invisible to the economy. That's the paradox. Imagine this. You watch cars pass through. All day, every day. People waving, taking photos, buying one soda, and leaving. Nobody stays. Nobody invests. You're a photo op, not a destination. A local wrote online. People wave when you drive by, mostly because you're the only thing happening. That's friendly and deeply sad. That sentence should be Adrian's town motto. Route 66 was supposed to save small towns, connect them, give them purpose. For Adrian, it just highlighted irrelevance. You're a dot on a map people use to confirm they're going the right direction. That's it. The creepiness comes from proximity to success. You're so close to being a thriving tourist town. You have the infrastructure, the location, the branding, and it doesn't matter. Nothing changes. That's worse than being forgotten. That's being seen and dismissed. Valverde. Valverde was never meant to be permanent. That's the curse. Border era outpost. Strategic location for ranching, railroads, enforcement. Not for families. Not for community. For function. When the function ended, so did the town. Current population, effectively 0. Extreme desert heat. Limited water access. Survival is a full-time job. Valverde was always managed rather than governed. Decisions made by county, state, and federal authorities. Locals didn't get a voice. A former resident's relative wrote, "It felt like living somewhere temporary, even if your whole life was there. That's the curse of Valverde. Nothing was meant to last, including you." That's not poetry. That's psychological damage. You can't build a life in a place designed for disposal. You can't invest emotionally in a location that was always intended to be abandoned. Valverde represents disposable geography. Land used and discarded, and the people who lived there, also disposable. That's the creepiest part. Not ghosts, not disasters. The realization that you were never supposed to matter. You were infrastructure, and when infrastructure ages out, it gets replaced. Alamore. Alamore is what happens when the water goes bad and nobody fixes it. Once served by a railroad stop and gypsum plant. Then the water became contaminated and undrinkable for years. Current population, under 10 people. No store, no clinic, no school, no infrastructure. You can't bootstrap your way out of bad water. You can't grit your teeth and power through contamination. Water is non-negotiable. And when local government lacks the authority or willingness to demand fixes, decay becomes inevitable. The railroad left, the plant closed, the water stayed bad. So everyone who could leave, left. Who stays? People with nowhere else to go. People too poor to move. People trapped by circumstance pretending it's choice. Alamore is creepy because it's a modern infrastructure nightmare with no villain. No evil corporation. No malicious government. Just neglect. System failure. Bureaucratic indifference. Nobody decided to kill Alamore. They just decided not to save it. It's the slow realization that your survival isn't a priority. You're not worth the investment. You're on your own. In the desert. With bad water. And that's fine. To everyone except you. Lajitas. Lajitas is creepy in a different way. It's a controlled environment disguised as a town. Population, 50 to 75 people, entirely dependent on tourism. It's a resort destination, curated, managed, and fake. They elected a beer-drinking goat named Clay Henry as mayor in the 1980s. Hilarious, right? No, it's symptomatic. It means governance is symbolic, not functional. It's a joke because real leadership doesn't exist. When tourists leave, Lajitas becomes clinically silent. No restaurants, no services, no social life after dark. You're surrounded by luxury branding and completely isolated. Imagine living in a place that only exists when other people are watching. When they leave, you're in a stage set, empty and hollow. Your entire community's purpose is to entertain strangers. That's it. That's your reason for existing. The creepiness is psychological. It's the experience of isolation wrapped in luxury marketing. You're not poor. You're not abandoned in the traditional sense. But you're not real either. You're a theme park employee, living in the park after closing. Everything's beautiful. Everything's maintained. And none of it is yours. You exist to serve a fantasy. When the fantasy closes for the season, what are you? That question has no good answer. Rangerville. Rangerville is the least creepy on this list. That's not saying much. Population, around 75. Located in Cameron County, near the Mexican border. It's not abandoned, it's not haunted, it's just forgotten. Incorporated. Technically functional, but with a tax base that small, everything requires county and state support. The town exists in bureaucratic limbo. Too small to sustain itself, too stubborn to dissolve. What makes it creepy, barely, is the realization that some towns only exist on paper. Rangerville has a mayor, a government, and official boundaries. But does it have a future? Does it have purpose beyond administrative formality? Probably not. It's the quietest kind of creepy. Not dramatic, not violent, just unnecessary. A place that keeps existing because nobody's officially shut it down yet, so Rangerville persists. Quietly, pointlessly, waiting for someone to make a decision. That decision will probably never come. Welder. Welder barely makes this list. It's the least creepy, but it's here. Population, around 1,000. That's practically a metropolis compared to the others. It's a small town in Gonzales County. It has a post office, a school, Basic infrastructure. So why is it on this list at all? The abandoned buildings. Scattered throughout town. Houses left empty. No explanation. No development plans. Just empty structures slowly decomposing. There's something unsettling about abandonment inside a functioning town. It's not full collapse, it's selective decay. Some houses occupied, some not. No pattern, no reason. You walk down a street and half the buildings are lived in and half are rotting. What happened? Why those houses? Why not others? Nobody knows, or nobody's saying. In 2010, someone posted photos of an abandoned house in Welder. Beautiful architecture, completely empty. Comments full of people asking, what's the story? No story, just abandonment. Welder is creepy like an uncanny valley is creepy. It's almost normal, almost functional, but something's off. So there you have it, 20 Texas towns that prove everything's bigger in Texas, including the existential dread. These are real places, with real histories, real trauma, real people who lived through, or didn't live through, absolute nightmares. If you made it this far, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into places that shouldn't exist, but do. And if you're planning a creepy Texas road trip based on this video, please don't. But if you do, film it, for science. When you think Florida, what comes to mind? Theme parks? Beaches? Retirement communities where your grandma plays pickleball and aggressive bingo? Sure, but Florida is also haunted as hell. Like the most paranormal activity per capita in America kind of haunted. Today, we're counting down the 20 creepiest, most haunted towns in Florida. Number 1, St. Augustine. There's a city in Florida that's been collecting ghosts for 450 years. Not decades, centuries. St. Augustine is the oldest continuously occupied European settlement in the continental United States, founded in 1565. That's older than Jamestown, older than Plymouth Rock. And every single year of those 450 plus years has added another layer of death, warfare, disease, and tragedy. This place is a paranormal lasagna. Let's start with the St. Augustine Lighthouse, built in 1874. Paranormal investigators consistently rank it as one of the most haunted locations in America. Visitors report shadowy figures climbing the spiral staircase, disembodied voices calling out names, full-body apparitions of lighthouse keepers who fell to their deaths, and shipwreck victims who drowned just offshore. Fun vacation spot! Then there's the Castillo de San Marcos, a 17th century fortress with literal dungeon cells where people were chained and left to die. Tourists report cold hands touching them in empty rooms, apparitions captured on film, the smell of gunpowder from battles that ended 200 years ago. And that's just 2 locations. Flagler College? Haunted. The old jail? Super haunted. Spanish military hospital? Aggressively haunted. Huguenot Cemetery holds over 400 yellow fever victims from the 1800s who apparently never got the memo that they're dead. Every corner, every building, every cobblestone street. This entire city is a ghost convention, and you're the guest of honor. Number 2, Casadega. Picture a town with a population of less than 100 people, and every single one is a psychic or medium. I'm not joking. Casadega is a spiritualist camp founded in 1895 by a trance medium named George P. Colby, who was literally led there by spirits. The town exists for one reason, to communicate with the dead. That's the whole business model. You want your palm read? Available. Tarot cards? Sure. Full seance where grandma tells you where she hid the good jewelry? They got you. And here's where it gets wild. The town cemetery has something called the Devil's Chair, an oversized stone bench that is supposedly haunted by actual demonic forces. Local legend says if you sit in it at midnight, the devil himself will appear and grant you a wish. Or kill you. The whole place looks like a movie set, except it's real, and people live here, surrounded by this energy 24/7. Can we talk about the fact that this town is located directly off Interstate 4, between DeLand and Deltona? You could accidentally exit here looking for gas and end up in a conversation with your dead relatives. No warning signs. No welcome to Psychic Town billboard. Just bad vibes. Number 3, Rosewood. There's a place in Florida that doesn't exist anymore. Not because people left, because it was erased. On January 5th, 1923, a mob of over 200 white men attacked the prosperous black community of Rosewood in Levy County. They killed an estimated 300 residents, men, women, children, and burned every single structure to the ground. Every home, every church, every business, gone. The survivors fled into the swamps and never came back. The town was abandoned, and today, Rosewood is just empty land, forest, nothing. A ghost town born from racial massacre. This isn't haunted in a fun, spooky way. This is haunted in a the earth itself remembers trauma way. Locals and paranormal investigators report hearing sounds during January, especially around the anniversary date. Voices, crying, the phantom toll of a church bell that was destroyed a century ago. The town is gone, but the pain isn't. If you ever wondered whether places can hold memory, Rosewood is your answer. And the answer is yes, and it's horrifying. Number 4. Ybor City, Tampa. Ybor City has the 4th most haunted building in America. The Cuban club, Círculo Cubano de Tampa, built in 1917, earned that ranking from the Travel Channel. Not some local blog, not your cousin who sees ghosts in his bathroom mirror, the Travel Channel. Oh, and Ybor also has the 33rd most haunted building, so they're double dipping on the National Haunted Leaderboard. The Centro Español building has reports of a ghostly safe. Not a ghost near a safe, a phantom safe that appears and disappears, haunted by a man who died trying to break into it in 1908. Imagine being so committed to robbery that you haunt the safe itself for over 100 years. Respect the dedication, honestly. Ghost hunting teams document activity here constantly. EVP recordings, shadow figures, doors slamming in empty buildings, cold spots in 90-degree Florida heat, which should be physically impossible, but here we are, and people just live here, work here, grab Cuban sandwiches at 2 a.m. surrounded by spirits like it's normal. If you think that's wild, the whole historic district is like this. Every cigar factory, every old bar, every brick building from the 1800s has a ghost with a story and an attitude problem. Ybor City said, "Why have one haunted building when you can have all of them?" Number 5. Key West. Key West has a haunted doll so evil that tourists are scared to take pictures of it. His name is Robert. Robert the doll lives in the Fort East Martello Museum, and he's considered one of the most cursed objects in America. Visitors who photograph him without asking permission report accidents, illnesses, job loss, and relationship problems for years afterward. The museum keeps a box full of apology letters from people begging Robert to lift the curse. But Robert's just the opening act. Ernest Hemingway's house? Haunted by Hemingway himself, allegedly wandering the property drunk and angry, which honestly sounds very on brand. Key West Cemetery is a crowded necropolis packed with 19th century yellow fever victims, Cuban revolutionaries, and a Bahamian woman's ghost who allegedly patrols the graves, violently protecting them from disrespect. With a population of about 26,000 living residents and about 100,000 cemetery burials, yes, really, the dead outnumber the living 4-1. That's not a town, that's a graveyard with a tourism problem. And yet people vacation here. They snorkel, they do bar crawls, all while Robert the Demon Doll judges them from his glass case and plans their downfall. Number 6. Brooksville. Brooksville has one house that paranormal investigators call the most active location in Florida. The Maystringer House, built in 1856, is so haunted that ghost hunting teams use it as a training ground. You want to learn how to communicate with spirits? Start here, where the spirits communicate back, whether you want them to or not. Visitors report full-body apparitions in Victorian clothing, disembodied voices having complete conversations, cold spots that drop 20 degrees in seconds, objects moving across rooms, the feeling of being watched from every corner. And here's the thing, this isn't an abandoned creepy mansion. It's a historic site open to the public. You can just go there, walk through rooms where people died, stand in doorways where shadows appear on camera but not in person. The whole downtown area dates to the 1850s, and apparently, everyone from that era decided to stick around permanently. Imagine living in Brooksville and having to explain to out-of-town friends, oh yeah, the town's most famous landmark is the house where ghosts aggressively interact with visitors. If you moved here, how long would you last? 30 days? A week? I'm giving myself 3 hours, max. Number 7. Fort Date. There's an entire abandoned military town on an island in Tampa Bay. You can only reach it by boat, and it's overrun with rattlesnakes. Fort Dade was once a fully functioning military base, with hundreds of residents, schools, electricity, a hospital, jail, tennis courts, a movie theater, and a bowling alley. A self-contained community. Then the Spanish-American War ended, and the military just left. Everyone left. The buildings are still there, crumbling, covered in vines, slowly being reclaimed by nature. And the only inhabitants now are rattlesnakes and mosquitoes the size of small birds. Thrillist called Fort Dade Florida's creepiest ghost town. And honestly, fair. Picture this. You take a ferry to a deserted island. You walk through empty barracks where soldiers once slept. You peek into the old jail where prisoners were held. You hear nothing but wind and waves. Then you spot a rattlesnake coiled in a doorway, and remember you're trapped on an island with no medical services. And locals swear the place is haunted by soldiers who died on the island and don't realize the war ended over 100 years ago. No power, no water, no cell service. Just you, the ghosts, and the snakes. If Fort Dade had a Yelp review, it would be atmosphere, 5 stars. Safety, 0 stars. Would not return. Number 8. Micanopy is the oldest inland town in Florida. And when I say old, I mean Seminole War old. Founded in the early 1800s, this entire town is a time capsule of 19th century buildings, Victorian architecture, and history that refuses to stay buried. The Herlong Mansion, now a bed and breakfast because apparently people want to sleep in haunted houses, is reportedly haunted by a family member who died in an upstairs bedroom the instant they inherited the property. Can we talk about that timing? Inherits mansion, dies immediately, haunts it forever. That's commitment to real estate. The town's historic cemetery is the third oldest in Florida. Graves date back to the mid-1800s. Paranormal investigation groups document activity there so often, it's basically a rotating door of ghost hunters with EMF readers and night vision cameras. And the vibe here is quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you feel watched even when the streets are empty. Spanish moss hangs from ancient oak trees. Buildings lean slightly like they're tired. Everything feels preserved, but wrong. Micanopy said, "We're historic and haunted, and committed to both fully." Number 9. Pensacola. Pensacola's historic district is so haunted that they run nightly ghost tours because the demand is that high. The Pensacola Lighthouse is considered one of the most haunted lighthouses in America. And America has a lot of haunted lighthouses, so that's saying something. Visitors report apparitions of lighthouse keepers, disembodied footsteps on the spiral stairs, and voices calling out warnings from empty rooms. Then there's Fort Pickens, where Civil War soldiers died and apparently never left. Tourists photograph shadow figures in Union uniforms standing in doorways. Reenactors report feeling hands on their shoulders during events. Nobody there, just dead vibes. The entire historic Pensacola village is packed with 19th century homes, where families report paranormal activity so frequently, it's just part of living there. Oh, the ghost knocked over the lamp again. Typical Tuesday. And here's what gets me. Pensacola is a gorgeous coastal city with beautiful beaches and incredible seafood. You could have a perfect vacation here, but at night, when you're walking back to your hotel through the historic district, you'll hear footsteps behind you. You'll turn around, nobody there. Welcome to Pensacola, where history is alive, and also literally alive. Number 10. Jacksonville. Jacksonville has a place called the Devil's School. Located near the intersection of I-95 and I-10, this abandoned structure is widely considered the most haunted location in Jacksonville, and the urban legends around it are unhinged. A crazed janitor, a cannibalistic principal, students who died under mysterious circumstances and never left. Are these stories true? Probably not. Does that make it less terrifying? Also no, but Jacksonville doesn't stop there. The Florida Theater, built in 1926 on the site of an old police station, is reportedly haunted by former prisoners and cops who died in the building. Evergreen Cemetery has centuries of residents who make their presence known. The downtown historic district has ghosts in business suits walking into buildings that don't exist anymore. And Jacksonville is huge. It's the largest city by area in the continental US. So you've got all this space, all this history, and all these ghosts spread out across 875 square miles. That's not a haunted city. That's a haunted county, pretending to be a city. Number 11. Tarpon Springs. Tarpon Springs has a cemetery so haunted, they offer guided ghost tours. Rose Hill Cemetery is the first segregated cemetery in Pinellas County, which already gives it dark historical weight. And visitors report apparitions, unexplained voices, and shadow figures moving between graves. But the whole town has this energy. The historic train depot? Haunted. Louise's Saloon? Haunted. The Cheney House? So haunted they use ghost hunting equipment during tours and expect results. And people book these tours on purpose. They pay money to walk through graveyards at night and ask spirits to communicate. Picture this. You're on vacation in Florida. You've had a nice day at the beach. You think, you know what would be fun? Asking dead people questions in a cemetery after dark. Who thinks like that? Apparently everyone in Tarpon Springs. The town also has a heavy Greek heritage from sponge diving history, which adds cultural richness, but also another layer of tragic deaths at sea. Divers who never came up. Storms that killed entire crews. Tarpon Springs is beautiful during the day and deeply unsettling at night. Perfectly balanced, as all Florida towns should be. Number 12. Arcadia. There's a small town in DeSoto County that locals describe with one word: unsettling. Arcadia has everything you need for a creepy atmosphere. Historic orphanages where children suffered, abandoned asylums where patients were forgotten, turn-of-the-century plantation homes slowly decaying, Victorian architecture that looks gorgeous in daylight and horrifying at dusk. The Opera House? Haunted. The old downtown? Haunted. Random residential streets? Also haunted. And here's the detail that gets me. Deer roam freely through the streets at night, just walking around like they own the place, which creates this eerie scene where you're driving through town, it's dark and quiet,
and suddenly there's a deer staring at you from someone's front yard.
Nature reclaiming civilization in real time. Paranormal forums consistently mention Arcadia as one of Florida's creepiest towns. Not because of one specific location, but because the whole place feels frozen in time. Like everyone left in 1920, and the buildings are still waiting for them to come back. Why do small towns always have the most haunted opera houses? What is it about community theater that attracts ghosts? If I die, I'm haunting a Costco. At least there's samples. Number 13. Williston. Williston has a place called Devil's Den. Notice a theme with Florida naming things after the devil? Devil's Den is a karst window, basically a cave opening that exposes a crystal clear 72-degree spring 120 feet wide. And on cold mornings, mist rises from the opening like smoke, which is why early settlers thought it was literally an entrance to hell. Reasonable conclusion, honestly, but here's where it gets darker. The site contains Pleistocene-age fossils, ancient animal bones, and human remains. So you've got this beautiful natural spring that's also an archaeological site full of bones from creatures and people who died thousands of years ago. It's a swimming hole and a mass grave simultaneously. Fun for the whole family. And people scuba dive here. Tourists pay money to swim in a cave full of ancient death. Picture this. You're floating in crystal clear water. You look down. You see a human skull lodged in the rock. Do you A. Leave immediately. B. Stay and enjoy your vacation. If you answered B, you're built different. Number 14. Lake Wales. Lake Wales has a 205-foot tower that some people think looks evil. Bach Tower Gardens features the Singing Tower, built in 1929 with neo-Gothic architecture that gives off serious villain's lair energy. It's beautiful and unsettling at the same time, like a fairy tale castle designed by someone who only read the dark original versions. Reddit's Evil Buildings subreddit featured it, which is basically the internet's seal of approval for creepy architecture. But Lake Wales also has Spook Hill, a gravity hill where cars appear to roll uphill when in neutral. It's an optical illusion, but local legend says it's haunted by either a Native American chief and giant alligator who died fighting, or two pirate ghosts. And here's what gets me. Bach Tower plays carillon music throughout the day. Beautiful bell concerts echoing across the gardens, which sounds lovely until you're there alone at dusk and realize you're listening to music from a tower designed to look like something out of a gothic horror novel. Romantic? Sure. Creepy? Absolutely. Number 15. Sarasota. Sarasota is all white sand beaches and art galleries, until you learn about the cryptid. Emerson Point Preserve has reports of an unidentified shrieking creature that locals can't explain and won't approach. Not a known animal, not a bird, something else that screams in the woods at night. Sleep tight. Then there's Rosemary Cemetery, where an 1887 murder victim's spirit allegedly laments her fate. Visitors report hearing crying, seeing a woman in Victorian clothing, and feeling overwhelming sadness near specific graves. The Sarasota Opera House has phantom footsteps. The Gator Club, a former speakeasy and brothel, has apparitions of flappers and gangsters. Bellhaven Mansion has reports of full-body apparitions and black masses, which sounds vague and terrifying. And Sarasota markets itself as this upscale cultural destination. Art museums, theater, gourmet dining. But at night, there's a creature in the preserve and ghosts in the opera house. Can we talk about how Florida just casually has cryptids mixed in with the ghosts? Other states pick a lane. Florida said, we'll take both, and throw in some cursed dolls. Number 16. Deltona. There's a stretch of Interstate 4 where your phone stops working, your radio goes silent, and then it starts broadcasting voices asking, who's there? The I-4 dead zone spans the bridge over the St. Johns River near Deltona, and it's been the site of 1,000 to 1,700 documented accidents since 1963. That's not normal. That's statistically impossible unless something is causing it. Motorists report complete cell signal loss, radio static, or dead silence. Unexplained voices on empty frequencies. A feeling of dread while crossing the bridge, and it's exactly 1 mile long. You enter, your phone dies, you hear whispers, you exit. Everything's normal again. Picture this. You're driving through Florida at night. Everything's fine. You hit the bridge. Your GPS cuts out. Your music stops. And then your radio crackles to life with a voice asking, why? Would you keep driving or turn around? Be honest. And here's the thing. People drive this route every day. Commuters just accept that there's a haunted mile of highway where technology fails and ghosts ask questions. That's not a road. That's a portal. If Deltona had a tourism slogan, it would be, we have a normal town, except for the cursed highway. Ignore that. Number 17. Clearwater. Clearwater looks perfect during the day. Mediterranean revival architecture, palm-lined streets, beautiful beaches, upscale restaurants, and then the sun sets. Locals describe downtown Clearwater at night as unnervingly empty. The streets are too clean, too quiet. The The buildings are beautiful, but lifeless. And there's this pervasive feeling that you're being watched. Part of this is the heavy Scientology presence. The Church of Scientology owns significant portions of downtown, and their facilities dominate the landscape, which creates this weird atmosphere where everything looks pristine but feels wrong. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been somewhere that's too perfect? Where everything is clean and organized, but your instincts say leave? That's Clearwater at night. And tourists visit without knowing. They book hotels, hit the beach, walk downtown at night, and wonder why they feel uncomfortable in a place that should feel safe. It's not haunted in the traditional sense. It's haunted by modern weirdness. Clearwater said, "Ghosts are old news. We're going for psychological unease." Number 18, Port St. Lucie. Port St. Lucie has a tree where a serial killer buried his victims. It's called the Devil Tree. In 1971, serial killer Gerald Schaefer murdered 2 teenage hitchhikers and buried them near a gnarled 150-year-old oak in Oak Hammock Park. And locals swear the tree is cursed. Visitors report feelings of dread near the tree, unexplained sounds, electronics malfunctioning, an overwhelming urge to leave. And people still visit. True crime enthusiasts, ghost hunters, teenagers on dare. They stand next to a tree marking a burial site and take selfies. Humans are wild. Can we talk about how Florida has multiple locations called Devil's Something? Devil's Chair, Devil's Den, Devil Tree, Devil's School. Either Florida has a branding problem or the devil has a timeshare here. Imagine you're a real estate agent in Port St. Lucie. Someone asks, "What's nearby?" And you have to say, "Great schools, shopping, parks, and the tree where a serial killer buried people." Very historical. If you lived near the Devil Tree, would you walk past it at night? Number 19, Cedar Key. Cedar Key is a Gulf Coast island that used to be a thriving port. Now it's full of decaying buildings, abandoned docks, and the spirits of fishermen who died at sea and allegedly wander the shore at night, looking for boats that don't exist anymore. The town was once a major salt production and shipping hub in the 1800s. Hundreds of workers, bustling docks, economic prosperity. Then storms came. Industries collapsed, people left, and the buildings stayed. And locals talk about seeing figures on the docks at dawn, hearing voices calling out warnings, finding fishing nets arranged in patterns nobody made. Ghost fishermen, still working. Still trying to bring in the catch. If that's not dedication, I don't know what is. Cedar Key is beautiful, in a melancholy way. The kind of place that makes you feel nostalgic for a time you never experienced. But it's also eerie. The kind of place where you take a sunset photo and later notice a figure in the background you don't remember seeing. Would you spend a night in an abandoned Cedar Key building? Number 20, Tuckersville. Tuckersville is a ghost town in the Kissimmee Prairie. It was founded in the 1870s as an agricultural settlement. Families farmed, built homes, started a community, and then they disappeared. Not moved away, disappeared. Local legend says the Tucker family vanished under mysterious circumstances. No bodies found, no explanation, just empty homes and unanswered questions, and the town was abandoned. Today, Tuckersville is mostly gone, overgrown by Florida wilderness, reclaimed by nature. But hunters and hikers who pass through the area report strange occurrences. Voices in empty fields, the smell of cooking from nowhere, structures that appear and disappear, a persistent feeling of being followed. Picture this. You're hiking through the Kissimmee Prairie. You smell bread baking. You follow the scent. There's nothing there. Do you keep hiking or run back to your car? Tuckersville represents the kind of creepy that's worse than ghosts. It's the creepy of unanswered questions. What happened to the Tuckers? Why did everyone leave? Where did they go? Nobody knows. And maybe that's scarier than any haunted house. So there you have it. 20 towns in Florida where the dead don't stay dead. The living don't stick around. And visitors immediately regret their GPS choices. Would you visit any of these places? Hit that subscribe button and check out our other videos on creepy towns.